I stood in front of a statue called the Charioteer. It's a Greek statue. It's in Delphi. Tall. And it was 500 BC. It made me cry. And I thought, boy, that's what an architect should do, is be able to have an emotional response with their work that lasts through the centuries. So that's what I try to do. Now, I know that's very pompous, but at least it's a wish, it's a hope. There was nothing in my background. I studied math and physics. I loved physics and chemistry in high school. And I also did wood shop, so I made things in the wood shop. I went to different schools looking at what they did, and they had books in my high school of what an architect does, whatever. And it also had a book on the schools where they teach and what kind of... And so architecture in those books in Toronto, Canada, where I was, were boring because they were about doing little cottages. And that didn't interest me, so I just closed the book. I became interested in chemical engineering. I had a cousin who was a chemical engineer, so I thought maybe I'd be interested in that. I went to a laboratory with a guy that took me, and it was, I couldn't stand it. They were doing the same tests 100 times to gauge the paint for a paint company. When I was a kid, my mother took me to an art museum, and I was always interested in that. And she also took me to classical concerts. And I was always interested. So all my life, I followed that. I came out to LA from Canada. We were very poor. I was a truck driver. It's an old story. I'm tired of saying it, but I took a night class I took several night classes at USC and at LA City College. In City College, I took calculus, and one of the classes I took was in perspective. I don't know why I took that. And I got an F. I failed. And I got very angry. And so I went back and took it again. And I got an A. So there was something compelling about that. I took a class in ceramics, and the teacher was building a house by an architect. He invited me to come look at his house under construction. He had a sense of something. So I went, and after that meeting, he enrolled me in the architecture school night class. He said, "Why don't you try this? It may be interesting to you." Well, I did really well, and they put me in second year, and so I was off. It was all by chance, I mean. Well, I used to go to, they had every Friday night in Toronto at the university, they had a lecture series and none of my friends wanted to go, so I used to go alone every Friday. And at one of those lectures, a guy was showing a building in Boston, and was showing furniture, and it was Alvarado, but I didn't know it. I mean, I knew it, but I didn't know who he was, you know. And I was very taken with what he was saying and doing. It was quite, and I never forgot that. And then, as I became an architect, I realized it was Alvarado. So I went back and checked the school records, and it was Alvarado. And then I visited Aalto's studio in Helsinki, and they let me sit in his chair, and they proved that it was Alvarado, November 16th, 1946 or something like that. That I really was there, and that was it. So there were little pieces of it, you know, but they weren't coherent, and they weren't enough to make me think I was going to do that. They were just experiences, and I was at that time more interested in, it was the beginning of maglev transportation. They were talking about it. It was the beginnings in the 40s. They were starting to develop this way of transportation. And I was interested in the sciences of that, and so I was interested in a lot of things. I don't know.
But this interest for form and material is an interest you find in art as well.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Well, I think once I started studying architecture, I was pretty thorough in doing history of architecture. Even though the schools weren't, USC didn't have a program for architectural history. It was once a week for an hour with terrible slides, terrible pictures. And then I traveled to Europe. I spent a year in Europe and got the real juice. I went through Italy and experienced the Laurentian Library. Living in California and growing up in architecture, at the end of the war, my teachers came back from Japan, from the army, and showed pictures of Issei Shrine, Katsura Palace, Shosoin, I don't know, all those beautiful things, Kiyomizu. And so I went to Japan and went to see everything. And because in the school, when I was second, third year, my teachers were working their independent work looked like it was Japanese. They were using the language of Japan because it was so accessible with the wood frame here that, and some became Harwell Hamilton Harris and Gordon Drake and others. And of course the home builders, the Green Brothers and Frank Lloyd Wright, all had influence of Japan. And it was very seductive because it was easy to build. And I think it's still in here. Because when you look at Disney Hall, we invited the Gagaku Orchestra, which I used to play in here at UCLA. It's the Imperial Court musicians. But the real ones, I convinced them to come here They never traveled, and they came to Disney Hall. You put them on the stage, and you'd think Disney Hall was a Japanese temple. So it's pretty interesting. You don't get very far from those influences. Well, first of all, if you're going to be an architect, you have to learn the craft. You have to learn how to build. You have to learn the engineering. You have to learn how to be responsible to build something that's not going to leak, that's going to stand up, that's not going to kill people, that's going to be... So there's a discipline you have to learn, for sure. Your personal spirit has to evolve into your language that you create. When I teach a class, I always ask the kids to write their signature. And so if you have 10 kids and they each write their signature and you look at them, they all look different. And so I tell them, that's you, that's you, that's you. It's different when you write your signature, so it's got to be different when you produce your work. It's got to be your signature. And it's hard. It requires a certain amount of trust to go forward. That's the hardest thing, I think. I have it in my own family where I see my kids struggling with that. And how to cut away, take the chance to jump off into the unknown and not be afraid to do that. I think what comes out is personal, like your signature. And for better, for worse, that's worth, it may be great, it may be terrible, but you got to take the chance, right? An artist can do that. And some architects do it. Not a lot.
Tell me a little bit about your relation to art, because that's a theme. What fascinates you personally about art?
Well, it's freer spirit, because you just got to paint a brush and a canvas or something, and there's no budget, there's no time, there's no. The only things that are driving it are your own ghosts of some kind, that you have to be better than Rauschenberg or better than somebody. I think as time goes on, the best artists are themselves. They're not, Bruce Nauman has never been anybody else but Bruce Nauman, and he doesn't care. He probably cares, but it doesn't matter if he cares, because it's not in his gut to change anything because he cares. So he's pure, one of the purer people I know. And I've always liked that. And Rauschenberg for me was like that. A little more flamboyant, outgoing, more fun to be with. Bruce is very quiet. But I think I never talked philosophy with Rauschenberg or with Bruce or with Oldenburg or with Chamberlain. There's no discussion about that. And we spent a lot of time together, all of those people. That's what I've lost by being 90, and because they were my backup. They were, it's not that they said, hey, Frank, you're doing a great job. It's not that. I didn't mean that. But I knew I was okay when they talked to me about stuff.
You had a silent understanding.
Yeah, we talked. And
today people are looking at the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao. Some cry, many definitely say that's a Gehry and only a Gehry.
yeah. Well, you have to understand the Basque culture. There's a clarity in them that I really enjoyed in working with them. I had a museum director, Tom Kranz, who had the vision of having a museum there, and having a museum that would be a certain size, have a certain relationship to the art world. His discussions with me were about that he wanted, if the gallery was going to show living artists, he wanted the galleries to be provocative and create a response, and then the artists who were no longer alive, who couldn't defend themselves, he said, let's just make white boxes. That's what we did.
You once mentioned that architecture is about feelings, and you also have a long time standing relationship with art. So clearly there's a relationship between architecture and art as well. How would you describe that?
Well, but I'm telling you, you don't get to that part until you create the kind of format for it, and that format has to be able to relate to the person who's paying the money, showing them that they can build such a thing for the budget they want. And if sometimes they can't, sometimes their wish is not. And this process very quickly brings that to everybody's attention, and you can deal with it in the front end rather than designing something, having it go out after everybody's in love, and then they find out they can't afford it. Then you start cutting it, it becomes a compromise. And I hate that part. I can't go there. I want to do it. I want to be real from the beginning. So, given that process, and given a lot of the computer programs and stuff that we've developed to make that process work seamlessly and carefully. The art part, what does it look like? What materials, what form, what, all that. And those are studies, model studies that we make that relate to site. And, if you build a tower, a 70 or 80 story tower, for the most difficult part is the curtain wall, because that is what the building's going to look like. And so you have to be very careful to develop a curtain wall with the experts, with the engineers, that can be built within their budget. So the design process, in the case of the building in Manhattan, 76-story building, apartment building, we started with the normal business architect's model, which was this high, and we put it in the site, and the owner realized that it would look like everything else, so they said they wanted higher. So 10 floors higher was a new cost, and they agreed to that. They wanted that it was worth it. Then we were next to the Woolworth building and the Brooklyn Bridge and near City Hall in Manhattan. And we wanted to create an ensemble with those buildings. So it wasn't a unique structure. It was a unique structure, but it was also a partner. It was, it had some resonance with the buildings around. And so the skin of the tower, I wanted it to look like the fabric that was, or the curves that come from Michelangelo or from, I forget names, Bernini. So I came to the office and we had the models of the tower, and so I said to my assistant, do you know the difference between Bernini curves and Michelangelo curves? Michelangelo's soft, and Bernini has this edge like Santa Teresa. And so we wanted Santa Teresa. And so we made that. And the reason we wanted that was we wanted in the box of the building, in the apartments, we wanted the rooms to have bay windows. So it means when you're on the floor, you walk out, you're in the air. You're looking. The window is all around you. It's not, you're not just looking through a window. And once we made the maquettes of that, and then we verified the costs of it, that we could do it, we made those curved pieces in the scale of the terracotta on the Woolworth building that was next door. So there would be a talking to it. And the Woolworth building had breaks in the tower, and we also had breaks in the tower. The Woolworth building had a hat on it, and I convinced my client not to put a hat on, to let the Woolworth building stay the leader, and we'll be part of an ensemble with the, and so that worked. And the bay windows work. And then with our technology, we were able to build the curtain wall, the exterior surface, with no change orders, because we controlled the cost. Change orders are 15%, usually 15%. So the money we saved on the process, we were able to afford the more expensive curtain wall. So we ended even.
So listening to this, I get the impression that architecture is always about, on the one hand, singularity of the building, on the other hand, being part of something whole, the surrounding.
I think so. I think that's what's missing In our cities, the buildings are singular. They don't have any kind of relationship to the whole. But because of the curtain wall requirements and the glass requirements, they end up all looking alike somehow. So it's kind of, but not in a good way. So if you go to every city in the world, all the new buildings look the same. Downtown Los Angeles now looks like downtown Seoul, Korea, like everywhere.
Being an architect, how important is traveling and knowledge of different cultures?
Just being a person, it's important to travel, to know as much as, I mean, look at the politics we're going through now in the world. It's helpful to know that other countries are still rational. It's scary. I think just for survival, you have to really know what's going on. We have a big group of people here from all over the world. And very talented, some of them. And we're having trouble with their visas and cards, which never happened before like this. So, and it's stupid, because they're very talented people. And they want to stay here and they want to contribute.
How do you explain this development? How could it get so far?
Well, I think it's greed. You have a whole party, a political party, the Republicans, that have given in to this monstrous man's ego. I know that. I know Mr. Trump. He's nothing, zero. He tells lies. He is a crook. He continues to thrive on it, I guess. It's amazing. And there are other parts of the world that have leadership that's similar. And there's parts of the world that don't. But I guess it's the haves and the have-nots. It's some people have the ability to go through life and survive and thrive and go to work and make enough money to live on and raise families and live within their culture and status. And then there's a lot of people that don't. And they're mad, they're angry. And so they blame everybody. Look at France now. They got a great president, Macron, very smart, very dedicated. In less than a year, they're trying to get rid of him already. I think it's a shame, you know.
So turning 90, what is your advice to the world? How can we go back on track?
We should just realize that in the end we're all the same. We're all human beings, and we have to have food, and we have to have water, and we have to have culture, and we have to have, and it's something we share as human beings. And there must be better ways to manage those resources so there's more equality. And the people that are not able to hold their own because of their birth shortcomings or intellectual shortcomings have to be treated like human beings by the rest of us and given support so they can live also. Because they can do something. They can be part of our world. And it's been proven they can bring joy to the world too.
You mentioned this statue in Greece.
I have a picture of it upstairs.
Which resembles the best in humankind, make us cry. Is it that the world needs looking at art, looking at architecture to remind us what we can do, opposed politics, Trump?
Yeah, I guess. I think, I think we have to have values that say we don't want to be lied to. We don't want our fellow human beings to be mistreated and there be inhumanity within our cultures to other people. We don't want to support that. So we have to draw a line in the sand and find ways to accept our community, our people around us,
But can artists and architects contribute to that?
Well, I think absolutely. Literature, certainly. People read books and change their minds. Some people read poetry and change their minds. Some people change their minds when they see a painting. Daniel Barenboim came here in Disney Hall, November 11, with the Devon Orchestra, who I support and have become part of. And they did Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony. And Daniel understood, he'd never been in Disney Hall. He conducted the youth orchestra, Palestinians, Israelis, all in the Tchaikovsky Four, and I heard the building in the music. He nailed it. And I started crying. I couldn't believe it. And I thought, well, maybe I just made that up because I wanted it to be that. And so I didn't say anything. And the next day, the critic wrote the same thing. And I didn't talk to him. And then once that happened, I asked other people, and they all had that same experience. So there's Daniel Barenboim, a musician, never been in a room, took a well-known piece of music with an orchestra of young people and blew the top off the room, made it the room and the music and the people all to one piece. Beyond belief. And Gustavo does that in his way, and Nesbeka did it in his way, but they're all different. You read it totally, all three of those, different. So that's the individual expression, and it comes from their individual experiences and their lives and their. And so if you're the listener and you go to 3 concerts of the same piece, you get 3 different experiences.
Handwritings.
Huh?
Handwritings.
Yeah, that's it.